I am very excited to be here today with Sandi Wisenberg, editor of Another Chicago Magazine. Hi, Sandi, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Becky, for having me.
And I'm cracking up because before we hit record, we were talking about hair and wellness tips and lots of fun stuff. So today's going to be a great conversation, but we'll keep it focused on the magazine. But anybody who has questions, thank you guys for showing up, and just go ahead and type your questions into the chat and I will work them into the conversation with Sandi. So let's jump right in. Tell us when the magazine was founded, why it was created, and tell us about the name also. I've always been curious about the name Another Chicago Magazine.
Okay, I brought some visuals. This is the very first issue. I will show it to you in a minute. It's going to be backwards, of course, but.
Oh, wow. That's great.
And this is from 1977, and it was published by students at the University of Illinois at Chicago, which had a slightly different name then. It was at Chicago Circle. And there's a title page, and it says, one of the many horrendous meetings we had to put out this magazine, we discussed what we should call it. Here's what we came up with. And they're all from Emma Lou's Review, Penumbra, Your Mama's Drawers, Blue Plate Special, You Can't Cheat, Miller High Life, Another Son of Walt Whitman. And so it was just to publish the poetry of the grad students. I think they were grad students. And then slowly it became independent and became a magazine to publish other people's work and not the founders' work. And this is issue 38 with Nan Andrews, Stuart Dybek, Marilyn Crissell, Timothy Liu, Tony Mendoza, conversation with Ron Carlson.
Oh,
and
wow.
It was thicker. It usually came out twice a year. And this was, then we had the 50th one was a Chicago issue with names you would recognize. Giran Seichel, I think I'm saying it right, Karash Ali Lansana, Simone Munch, Mike Pukin, Kathleen Rooney, David Trinidad, James Tad Alcox, Zach Dodson, Lindsay Hunter, Ling Ma, Achio Bejas, Bajo Ojukuti. And then there was another Chicago issue later. And this, I think, is the last issue that was in paper. And it's thinner.
Yeah.
And then we went online in 2017.
Ah, okay. I'm kind of disappointed you didn't go with Your Mother's Drawers. Journal.
Yeah, it sounds like a guy magazine, doesn't it?
So those are pretty hilarious names and a pretty funny introduction to that first issue. Would you say that humor is a significant part of the magazine?
I'm just turning my speaker up. That's what I'm doing.
Wow.
No, I mean, we like to have funny things, but I think most literary magazines don't get good, funny stuff. Yeah. We had somebody who sent us work, and we liked it, but we didn't publish it. And his name was Michael Cohen, and that's when Trump's lawyer was Michael Cohen, and we said, "Can you write something about it?" And so he did. Okay. So we like humor. I think it's just hard to find really good humor that is not just of the moment, that it could bear reading a second time.
Mm-hmm. And so when did you come on board to the staff, and how did that kind of develop?
It was basically my friends, Barry Selesky and Sharon Solwitz, were putting it out, and with their friend Sarah Skolnick. And they didn't have an official nonfiction section. They had et al., where they would just put nonfiction and anything kind of strange. And I just said, why don't you have a nonfiction editor? I'll be the nonfiction editor. And they said, fine. So that's how I became it. It's
Sounds
very
enthusiastic.
informal. I mean,
Fine.
because we're not attached to a university with grad students, it's more informal.
Got it.
No,
And so,
we're not that informal anymore.
right. And when was that? How long have you been with the journal?
This is the cutest thing.
Oh, we had somebody talking. 1997.
Oh, okay, great. So it's been online for a while. That's very cool. So would you say, I was looking through the site and I saw there's a very strong political current. Has that always been part of the magazine, or has it sort of evolved to include more political work? Has that been under your influence, or how did that kind of develop?
I think there was always the sense that it was political, because one of our contributors from about 20 years ago was saying that he mentioned in a job interview that he was writing about the foster care system and adopting or trying to adopt an autistic child. And either he or his interviewer said something like, oh, that's something for another Chicago magazine. So I guess we had a reputation of a place where you could write something political as long as it was literary. And I've tried to continue that. When I taught at Northwestern for a little time, I was the literary editor of Troy Quarterly, which was online, and I included books that were not just literary books. They were books about prison or biographies. And so that's one way we continue the ACM political interest or political emphasis. It's hard to say we want political stuff and then to look at what we get, because sometimes it's like an op-ed. So we don't want that. Again, we want something that can be read, several times, and people get more out of it each time, something that's layered. So, but we can more reliably get something political if we have book reviews.
That's so interesting. So one of my questions, I'm going to jump ahead because one of my questions was a larger kind of craft question about like what makes good political writing, and also related to the magazine specifically, what do you accept? But I'm thinking now that something that can be read several times is a very distinct kind of ask for a work. So it should be like, it sounds like it's okay if it speaks to the moment specifically, but there needs to be a kind of also transcendent quality to it, something that's timeless in it.
Yeah, I think so. Somebody approached me, I don't know, earlier this year, and she was an aid worker who had gone to Ukraine and done all these interviews with people. And so I worked with her to organize them by topic. And so we had a series of just pieces of the interviews with photos. And so I think that's definitely of the moment,
right?
But I chose things and she chose things before that. She chose quotes that were very much personal, but also I thought people could understand them and empathize and learn more about how it feels to be inside a war.
So let's back up and let's cover the
Okay.
so what do you publish just generally? And also I saw there are a lot of on the site, there are a lot of different categories. So when somebody submits work, do you want them to be submitting to a particular category? Like this is for your transformations, this is dispatches from the pandemic, or do you as editors sort of decide where it's going to go? And the writer shouldn't worry about that.
Yeah. We use submittable. And when we have specific calls, like we had a call for transformation, a call for race, riot, rebellion, revolution, to mark the anniversary of the 1919 Chicago riots. We had specific, I call them portals. I don't know if that's the right word, in submittable. So people would submit in there. We're still taking pieces about Ukraine. We're thinking of having a special call for pieces on war, but we don't have that yet because we have to catch up with what we've taken. I mean, what people have sent. We have to catch up with our submissions before we open up again to submissions in poetry, fiction, and nonfiction that are thematic. So we have poetry, fiction, nonfiction, translations, book reviews. We had plays for a while. We have art. So there is original art that goes with each piece. And I don't know if I'm leaving anything out. Interviews. So we're always looking for people to interview writers as well as artists and activists. And that's another way we can expand and make it more political. And book reviews, we haven't come out with this yet, but we want the book reviews for the near future, at least, to have some political element in it. It doesn't have to be polemical, a polemical book, but something that looks at the wider world.
Could the book review be like a political approach to a book that's not necessarily intrinsically political, but like the review itself puts the book in a political context? Or do you want the book to have some political component?
You have thought one step ahead of us. So in our call, we'll take that into consideration. A political way of looking at a book. That I think that's good. We'll have to talk about it.
Good, great. So it sounds like the best way, so if a writer's thinking about submitting their work, they should go to the submittable, see what's open for submissions, and then sort of decide like what portal their work, like, is this a Ukraine poem? Or is it just kind of a general poem, and just sort of decide like which portal to submit it to?
Right. And I have submitted things to other places in the wrong portal, so I know that happens. You just happen to click on the wrong thing. But just it's a little hard for us technically to move something. If somebody submitted a poem to nonfiction, it's kind of a pain to move it over to poetry to make sure the poetry editor sees it. So just try to keep things in the right genre. We also have people who will send us work in the tip jar. And that can be difficult too. So
should they, if they realize, this is just a logistical question, if I think writers are always wondering this, like if they realize their mistake, should they withdraw the work and then resubmit it to they should? Okay.
They should. I mean, if you don't have the extra money to do that, because we charge like $2 or $3, you could write to us.
Okay. Yeah. So what would you say are some overarching commonalities? Like you have so many different categories for some, there's art, interviews, poetry, then the special categories for different like war themes. Are there overarching qualities of the work that you accept? Like, can you identify certain elements that every piece that you publish has, regardless of the category?
I mean, we aim, I suppose, to have work that you would talk about with your friends.
Mhm.
You could say, oh, I just read this piece and it's like a poem, but it's nonfiction and it's all about a breakup and there's something really resonant about it.
Mhm.
It's not just this old breakup poem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I'm trying to think. Oh, we published a piece by somebody. It was really their first piece accepted by a literary magazine. And it was about just how difficult it was to get their ADHD medication.
Hmm.
Just having to go through the nurse and the whole system, and the whole rhythm of the piece was just this like frustration that made you want to keep reading it. It was very, very compelling.
Hmm.
And one of the problems the person was having was being ADHD makes it difficult to do routine things.
Hmm.
So it can be hard to make sure you get all your medicine when you need it.
Right. Right.
Just hard to get yourself to remember that.
Right. Interesting.
That was compounding things too. But I think it really gave a sense of what this person's struggle was like. And it just drew you in, I think, kind of like the ocean, just like da 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 da, you know.
Can you describe, I don't know if you can cover this because you're the nonfiction editor, but can you talk a little bit about what you're interested in terms of the fiction? Is it sort of character-driven work, more experimental? It sounds like from what you're describing, that piece was the style of the piece sort of echoed what the writer was communicating. But yeah, with the fiction, do you want to see like sort of, you know, a traditional plot structure? Do you like more kind of word experimentation?
The fiction editor has autonomy. So she and her, I think, 4 readers go through everything. And some is voice driven, but I think most of it is character driven. And maybe situation driven. And there's some humor there too.
Yeah. And I know you publish prose up to 7,500 words, which is pretty exceptional, especially for an online magazine.
Yeah.
Is that like, do you shy away from the longer work? Like some editors will say we will publish it, but really it's not ideal. So do you have any insight about like the sweet spot in terms of word length for prose?
I don't know, just as long as it's interesting.
Okay.
Which is subjective.
Of course. Yeah.
But I can't really remember the lengths of what we've published. I think most stuff is much shorter. At the same time, as a writer, I wrote a short story that's like 9,500 words, and I'm having trouble, getting it published. So I sympathize with people who write longer pieces.
Yeah, as a writer too, I also wonder, like I have this 7,500 word story and I'd love to publish it online because I like being able to share the work once it's online, but are people actually going to read something online for 7,500 words? I don't know. I maybe you have insight into how people are responding to the work and reading the work on the site, but it's just something that I think about.
People, I think, will I don't know. I don't know. Our metrics don't tell us if somebody goes all the way through. With reading something, we know how long I think we know how long they spend on each piece they read. And one of our most popular stories is called The Palaces of Saddam Hussein. And it's a mix of real and unreal. There was the editors before the online editors were publishing work that was kind of surreal. And that also teased the line between real and unreal. So it was all description about Saddam Hussein's palaces, and you couldn't tell what was true and what wasn't. And we had an inquiry from somebody asking us, and so I wrote to the author and never heard back. And I think that was fairly long. I'm tempted to look it up now while we're talking, but I'm not going to do that.
You had an inquiry, meaning like somebody wanted to contact the author.
I think it was a reporter. I'm not sure.
Wow.
Remember.
Yeah. Huh. That actually, do you have a sense of, some people, sometimes submitters want to know like if literary agents read certain magazines, do you have a sense of that for your magazine? Are there like agents and sort of people reaching out to you to get in touch with the writers?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Or not still. I know that there was especially one literary agent who would read the print. And I don't know if he's still in business. We would like literary agents to read it. Of course, everybody would. Because we're online, obviously you can, send your work around and put it on social media. And we promote the work on social media too.
Okay. So take us through the submissions process. So something comes in to Submittable, and what happens on your side?
Each genre is different. Like for translations, the translation editor reads it. And if he doesn't know the original language, sometimes he might consult with other translators. So he pretty operates on his own. Fiction editor, I'm not exactly sure how she assigns everyone to read the work, but everybody writes comments on Submittable. Nonfiction, there are 3 of us who read it. Sometimes if we're overloaded or we fall behind, 2 people will read it. And if we both, or the 3 of us, are all really gung-ho on something, we'll take it. And sometimes, like right now, we have a new writer who sent us something, we liked it, but we all felt the beginning needed to be edited. So I wrote to her and said, "Are you open to editing?" And she said yes. So then one of us will edit it. It's always, you're taking your chances with that because the writer might not like it and you put time in. We got a piece in nonfiction that I loved, except there were I thought there were inserts about a topic that kind of related to the piece, but I didn't think that those informational parts really fit in. And so I made a lot of edits, and the writer appreciated them and rewrote it, but still we disagreed on the inserts. I still didn't think they were integrated enough. And he said, thanks, but I don't want to take them out. And that was it. So we try not to say, if you revise it, we'll look at it again, because then just by experience, we we have the experience of people revising it in a way that we didn't think it should have gone. And that's just our opinion. And of course, the writer has their own opinion. But once we accept it, we put it on a form, and the associate managing editor posts twice a week.
Okay.
And one piece on Tuesday and one on Thursday. And the art editor chooses art to go with it. And the art doesn't really illustrate the work, it just sort of reflects the mood or somehow relates to the work. And then I edit the nonfiction. I also edit the interviews after the interview editor has gone through the interview, and also the fiction. And is there anything else I edit? It seems like there is, but the book reviews.
Okay.
I give it the final edit.
And so does the work come directly to you, or is it screened by readers first before going to the editors?
Oh, each editor handles their own.
Okay, but there are no like preliminary readers who screen it and then vote on it to pass it along to. So everything that is comes through and submittable goes directly to you or to the other editors, fiction editors.
All I can say is in nonfiction, it goes to all three of us.
Okay.
And sometimes I'll get to it first, and then I'll say, and if I really, really like something, I'll say, I really like this. I'd like to get it before someone else takes it, because we allow simultaneous submissions. And could you read this as soon as you can and let me know what you think? We've gotten behind because, frankly, I've been traveling a lot for my book. And so we're slower than usual, and we've lost a few pieces. People say, sorry, it's been taken. Sometimes things we don't like get taken, and it's like, okay, good. We don't have to send a rejection. Someone else liked it. That's great.
So is that when that happens? So when a writer says, sorry, it's been taken, it means that they neglected to withdraw it from your magazine? Does that irk you? Because we always hear as writers, like, you must immediately withdraw your work, but it sounds like people don't always do that.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I must not have been clear. Mostly I'm talking about, we're still in the process of talking about the work,
right,
and we like it, and then we haven't accepted it yet. And then they send us the note to withdraw.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Every so often happens the other way. They go, oh, I forgot to withdraw it. But usually it's like we're in the midst of discussing it. Okay. And
so can you tell us what kind of nonfiction you look for? Do you want pieces that have reportage? Do you want pieces that are more personal? Do you want pieces that are like a mix of both, sort of personal and reflection on larger issues? Or what exactly are you looking for in nonfiction?
I want something that stylistically knocks me out, and that often is reflective. We get a lot of traumatic stories. And after a while, it's like, okay, right, we have this trauma. Because you look at it just as a piece of work, and try not to look at it as this poor person went through this. But usually, if it's just reporting what happened to you or what happened to somebody in your family, unless it's like really, really well written, it's not, I don't love it. But if you tell me what happened and there's some reflection about it, like what it means, either what it means to you now or what it means in the greater society, and if that's done in a very graceful way, not, this is what I had to do because there was no public health around me. And then there's no reflection about public health situation or how that affected your life later or how that affected other people. It's not as strong.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, like, just to go back to the piece, and I can't remember the person's name. I think it's called Medicine. Echo Giardini is the author. That actually had a little bit too much of background in it.
Mhm.
And we asked for some about ADHD, and we asked for them to take some of that out. But what really made the piece special was the rhythm and the language and the emotion behind it.
Mhm.
So I really look for style and passion and some sort of intelligence, whether that is reflection or just a sense of what the piece means.
Mhm.
I mean, I've been around for a long time, so you see certain things over and over, and so they have to be really great. I organized a panel once at Nonfiction Now, and we called it, or I called it actually, No More Dead Grandmothers or something, or Too Many Dead Grandmothers, because I did publish a piece, I remember, about somebody's grandmother dying, but it was also about what was going on with the person taking care of the grandmother and his anger at the neighbor. And it was just a really interesting piece. But just one talking about the grandmother in very vague terms, and not great language,
Mhm.
it doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah. What are other things that you tend to see a lot of in submissions, either in terms of the subject matter or stylistically? Like you see people starting not in the right place often, or the ending isn't strong enough, or something like that.
Often the ending isn't strong enough, but by the time we've gotten there, we might work with the author.
Mm.
Um, I just read something last night that had tone shifts, and you can do it, but there was something off about the piece, and we still might take it. I don't know, it depends what the other ones think. But it was about, it started out kind of serious and funny, and then was sort of funny throughout, but then it became very serious. And I think the moods weren't handled in a very deft way.
Mm.
So the reader is just sort of like taken aback.
Mhm.
And I think about that. I think, well, is that okay? Because that's what life is like. You have these funny, lighter moments that people don't talk about, and then you have serious stuff, but something just felt unbalanced about it.
Mhm.
And then there's another piece too that I liked reading, but the person joked too much, and the joking covered up what was really going on.
Mhm.
It was like nervous laughter.
Mhm.
Um, and you can meander in an essay, but you have to meander thoughtfully. That if it sometimes we get stuff and it's about one thing, and then there's some flashbacks, and the flashbacks are really good, but the structure of it, the main event, the frame, isn't that interesting. So it needs to be revised a lot
Yeah.
by the writer, not by us.
Mhm.
And I never know in those situations if people want feedback, if they want to hear, we loved the flashbacks, but the frame didn't work for us.
Yeah.
Or if they would take umbrage you know. And I work, again, I just call, trying to revise with a writer, it's often heartbreaking because there's somebody, every single sentence was great. Just so tight, so well written, but there was no reflection on what it meant.
Mm.
And it was something that had happened like 30 years ago. And it had to do with something that happened, and the person was able to get out of it because of privilege, but there was no awareness of the privilege.
Mm.
Um, and then I got another one from somebody who has a really good teaching job. I really don't want to identify these people. Had a really good teaching job, and it was a memoir. And again, it didn't delve. Like every sentence was great. Every sentence was a good sentence. It was very, very interesting. But it's like, what did it mean on an emotional level as well as on a class level? And it's not like we need to know social class in every single thing somebody writes. But if somebody is writing about privilege that allows them to do something, we want some recognition of that if it's relevant.
It's so
I'm
interesting.
qualifying
Yeah.
everything. I know. So I don't know how.
No, well, it's so interesting because just hearing you, I mean, it's wonderful because it sounds like you take every submission so seriously. And to hear you say, like, it's heartbreaking that they couldn't rise above just the beautiful sentences and have some other layer of meaning, to hear an editor say that it's heartbreaking is so nice, because I mean, it comes through that you really think very seriously about like everything that you're getting in the submissions.
Yeah, and with the last one that was the memoir, and there was some emotion in it, but it wasn't delved into, and the class wasn't delved into. And this person has a good, I think it looks like a tenured teaching job, if I can remember, at a good place. And I thought, will this person be offended if I make a critique? And I thought, probably, so I didn't. We just sent the regular rejection letter.
That's going to be tricky with nonfiction. That's an aspect of editing nonfiction I haven't considered, that when you're offering feedback, it's not just on the work. It's also like you could really hurt someone's feelings because it's personal and it's about them, and you don't really know where they're coming from in their own relationship to the work. They might be able to see it objectively, or they might, as you said, sort of bristle at a mention of something that's part of their personal life.
Well, I think just craft wise, like if there's somebody, and again, who has a tenured job teaching in an MFA program, do they want to hear from me? I mean, I have qualifications. I've taught an MFA program, but do they really care? Do they want me to say, we like this a lot, but we wanted reflection?
Right.
Or they say, well, but what's really interesting, I sent something to Fourth Genre many years ago, and it was rejected with like a page of comments. And I thought, I don't need this page of comments because I've revised this and it's pretty much the way it's going to be. And the person just didn't like the form. I mean, maybe that's defensive, but anyway, I met Mike Steinberg, who was the founder of it, at a conference. And I said, I want to talk to you about this. And I told him, and then we just started talking, and we talked for like hours. It sort of led to a friendship. We were talking about our siblings. And so I used to see him at every conference, and, I was part of the dinner group that would go to dinner at least once. And he died a few years ago, which was really a loss. So if I hadn't had that critique, I don't know if I would have approached him to talk about it. So that led to something.
Did the critique become clearer in your eyes through sort of hearing his perspective on it?
He didn't write it.
Okay.
So, and I don't know if it was signed even. He just listened to me. And then, the piece was published elsewhere and was in an anthology or two. So I think the piece was solid, which is not what I think about everything I write. It was just the person was trying to make it into something different. And that's what the person who I worked with earlier, I felt that the informational parts were an intrusion because he hadn't integrated them. And for him, he felt the informational parts were really, really important. So,
it's interesting too, because you're editing to your own taste as a reader and to your own editorial preferences for the magazine. So you might say this essay would be stronger if the narrator reflected more on their own privilege or their own, high place in the pecking order of academia. But that's something you are interested in. And that might, another magazine might not even consider that as an issue in the essay. So yeah, I would think it's sort of tricky to provide that feedback, because how much of it is, something that's objectively wrong with the work, and how much of it is just when you're specifically, like you're saying, if you want to publish in this magazine, this is what it needs.
Yeah. And, when I was the nonfiction editor of ACM, Barry Selesky would have to read everything I accepted before I told the writer. And I don't remember. There was one piece, I had interviewed somebody who was fairly prominent, and then we asked for a piece we could publish. And I thought the piece was fine. And Barry said, no, this is really too light. And I said, okay, you reject it. I'm not going to.
So would you say that that's something that you look for in all the nonfiction submissions, that they have some social conscience? Or is that just the case with these particular work? Like, were those just examples in this particular case? But it sounds like maybe that because of the magazine's like political leanings, that the work, you wanted to have some kind of larger social connection.
Yes, or else like just blow us away with the style. Like this one piece by E.J. Colen, Colen, was like a prose poem about a relationship. And I don't think there was anything overtly political in it. But like if you're writing, and I wish I could give you the examples, but I don't want to out the people. But if somebody was able to do something, say I'm making this up, like if they broke their leg on a trip to Asia, and because they had money, they were able to go to a really good hospital to get it set. And if they don't acknowledge that they were able to do that because they were an American, because they had the money, then I think something is missing. It's not like you have to acknowledge your privilege at every moment, it's just like if there's a circumstance that you're able to get out of.
That's interesting.
Or that in your childhood, you had certain opportunities, and you write about the context without acknowledging the opportunities. And, people could say, well, it's obvious. Why do they even have to say it? But just in like a particular piece, it seemed to be crying out for that.
Mm.
And that would have, and also for the reflection. I
Yeah.
think there's an essay by Philip Lopate that used to be on his website, and then he redid his website. I'm not sure if it's still there. And the subtitle is A Pedagogical Mystery Story. And it's all about this. And I've sent this to contributors or would-be contributors just to say, he says that students will tell a story and they'll tell it really well, but then they don't talk about what it means.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people are taught show, don't tell. But in an essay, you can tell. And it's not just like saying, just putting in some statistics like X% of people get mental health help. That's not so interesting. But if you are talking about a stay in a mental institution, if you can somehow give some kind of context, or just anger. One person just wrote a piece, and I don't even know if it was rehab or if it was a health-related institution they went to, but they just wrote this angry little piece, I hate Kentucky. And that was enough, they didn't have to go into like anything else. So I can't think of the first title of Lopate's essay, but I could send it to you. I could send you a link and you could make it available to people.
Do you ever encounter writers who go too much in the other direction where they're sort of harping on their own privilege and it's sort of laden with a sense of guilt or anxiety about their position? I imagine that it could go like, how do you integrate something like that into an essay in a way that feels organic and meaningful and that isn't, here's my experience and here's why this experience is also totally invalid because obviously I'm, privileged as a American and living in this time. And so how do people sort of artfully integrate that level of analysis without being too heavy-handed in one direction and ignoring it altogether?
I think you can do it a lot of different ways. And this is more, I'm not talking about the magazine so much because I can't think of anything in particular, but just the asterisk and white space and saying, I realize that, I'm able to do this because of my background. I don't think anybody's gone on and on about it. What we do have, and this might be interesting, is sometimes, people are coming out about mental illness, and that's been going on for a while, 20, 30 years. And historically before that, but anyway, and they give every detail about every doctor, every encounter with the doctors, every group meeting in the institution. But that's a craft problem. And people have that same problem if they're writing about, leaving a place, they could write about everything. So I think I see that pretty often, just too much detail.
Yeah.
And we're told use detail, but you have to use the telling detail. And then after a while, you don't know which was more important, and the summary paragraph is a great thing.
Yeah.
Or even the white space, or even 3 weeks later, but these are things you just learn by time, with time, I think, and writing and instruction and reading.
Can you tell us a bit more about subject matter that you see a lot of? You mentioned
Oh,
the too many dead grandma. Do you
yeah,
see
I'm sorry. I got off on a
That's
tangent.
okay. No. It's
Okay.
also interesting. But like other and obviously like there's the character in a bar sort of thinking
Yeah.
their thoughts. That's a very common trope. I think the road trip editors have mentioned that as something that comes up a lot. So yeah, so I'm just curious what you tend to see a lot.
I don't know if we get road trips so much. Um, Foreign travel,
Mm.
which can be interesting, but it has to be meaningful. It can't be just something you would see in the travel section of the New York Times telling you about the place, unless it's really well done. But there has to be some personal element, even if it's your attitude, that can be personal. Yeah, dying relatives that, again, if it's great, it's great. Breakups, um, I want to say there was a high school assault, but that could be great if the person has the skill, craft, the intelligence to look back on it, even though that's a common thing, unfortunately, in our society. If it's really, really well told, then it's wonderful. But if the person doesn't have the writing skill, then it's not. Um, Relationships, maybe I said that, breakups, um, childhood memories that either aren't that interesting or aren't delved into.
Mhm. Is there anything specific you would like to see more of in submissions?
I mean, great writing, that's not so helpful, right? I mean, everybody says we want great writing that will hold up, to 2 readings, 3 readings. Um, um, that you really examined yourself
Mm. Hmm.
and the situation. Um, I know someone who wrote a book, part of it was about their relationship with somebody, but they never talked about what that person was going through at the time.
Hmm.
And that would have made the book better,
Mhm.
because now 20, 30, 40 years later, you can look back and say, oh yeah, I know this was going on with her.
Mhm.
Because personal nonfiction allows you a second sight in a way.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
can relive something and go, oh, um, wow, I didn't realize that then.
Sure. So just in terms of how the magazine is structured, we don't have too much time to get into it, but you're an independent magazine, so that means you subsist off grants. Is that
We
basically?
would like to subsist on grants. We haven't had a grant since we went online. It
Mm.
took a while to get our 501c3 back, because that had, it's just technical. And we're still working on we have our state one, but not our federal one. We did get a grant um, for an editor to travel
Okay.
and meet with writers.
Mhm.
So we have that. It's our first grant since we've been
Ah,
online, and we're applying for more. Um, And in the past, the magazine got NEA and Illinois Arts Council in Chicago, City of Chicago grants. It's a problem because we're all volunteer, and sometimes, I feel apologetic and want to write to people because in nonfiction, I know we've taken longer than usual. People sent stuff in the summer we haven't gotten to. And I want to say we're all volunteer, but it's like, even if you're all volunteer, you should be responsive. So I don't know if that's an excuse. It's not like we have grad students who are reading things for a grade. We do have interns who read work, but they read it alongside us. Oh, the other important section, let me just say, because I know you're winding up, we have a section called Forthcoming, and that is for excerpts of work published by small presses or to be published by small presses that is about to be published. And so that's a way for us to, we don't have to edit so much, but it's really a way to help small presses and to let people know what small presses are doing, and to expose them to it, and to get work that we might not otherwise get. People might not think of sending their work to us, but their publisher might send us their work.
Sure. And are you partial to Chicago-based writers? Is that at all a consideration?
Slightly, but just because somebody used to live here, we don't, I think we should take that out of the description, because I think we say online that we're slightly more biased towards Chicago writers. I don't know if that's really true anymore.
Okay. And are you looking for help at all for readers? Or if somebody is listening to this and they say, this sounds great, I'd love to get more involved in the magazine, can they reach out to you? Or is that not something that you're...
Yeah, definitely. Our general email address is on the site around submissions, I think. And so you can write and just say you're interested, whether you want to read fiction or nonfiction, poetry. We prefer people to be in Chicago, but not everyone is. We're like everyone else, we're looking for a diverse staff in all ways. And we're always looking for book reviewers, and a book review doesn't have to be like a 500-word book review. It can be a review essay. It can be stylistically experimental.
Okay, great. So one final question. This is a question I ask all editors. What keeps you going? I know it sounds like this is volunteer work, so I imagine you're also doing a ton of other things. You're on book tour, you're teaching, all this other stuff. So what keeps you going? What keeps you excited? What keeps you sort of motivated to keep the work up at this magazine?
I think it's a connection, because you're connecting with writers all the time, even if it's asynchronous. And then I've met people through reading work, and you kind of get a sense of what's going on in literature. I also want to say we would look for, in nonfiction, I would like more experimental work.
Okay.
So
all
that
right.
works.
Well, thank you very much, Sandi. I really appreciate you taking the time, and thank you to all of you who came out today.
Okay, thank you so much for having me.